Syed Kamall, Conservative MEP for London. The European Court of Justice has ruled on this air pollution case. It says no exceptions, that the UK should meet its obligations. What's your reaction?
Well, in some ways, London has been a victim of its own success, and you see that with increased pollution. Now, most people, in fact almost everyone, would say it's right that we reduce pollution. But the problem is, how do you do it? And what the court has allowed in this case is for the national court to decide the best way forward to sort this out. And you've got to remember that Britain isn't the only place facing this problem. There are 16 other outstanding cases, and maybe that shows that maybe some of the initial targets were a bit unreasonable, and we've got to work together for more reasonable targets.
These were targets set with agreement with the UK government. It's not like the UK wasn't involved when these targets were set. The UK was sitting at the table agreeing to them. It's had years to get its house in order to sort out these pollution problems in places like London. London particularly bad. The government not saying it's going to meet targets till 2025. This should have been sorted out years ago, shouldn't it?
What's happened in the meantime is that actually the government has met a number of other targets. It's met sulfur dioxide targets, it's met other targets. This particular target has proved difficult because actually of increased economic activity and the way that London is doing relatively better than most of the EU, and this has proved particularly difficult. Now, what the court is saying is that the national court should have more discretion over how this target is met as quickly as possible. And let's be quite clear, people are saying we shouldn't, no one's saying we shouldn't meet targets. What we're saying is let's make sure that we can do this in the most sensible way and get the right balance between economic success and reducing pollution.
So how would you like to see these targets met? What kind of measures should now be put in place in London to sort this out?
Well, actually, it's not for me as a politician in Brussels to be telling people in London how they should be solving these targets.
But as a London MEP, you may have some advice on how you think London could go about it.
My advice to people in London would be let both sides sit down and let's work out what we can tackle in a reasonable time frame. Let both sides get round the table and show each other the particular requirements they want, but also some of the difficulties they may be having in facing those targets and how they can work together to make sure that we reduce pollution in London and make sure we have a cleaner London for everyone.
The Mayor of London, Boris Johnson, has talked in the past about an ultra-low emissions zone. Is that a method that you would support? What kind of ideas could be on the table? People talk about removing cars from central London, getting rid of diesel fumes in buses and so forth.
I think the fight against pollution is something that everyone would agree with. And I think what you have to do in a case like this is look at all the options and say, how do we get the right balance between economic growth and reducing pollution? And all the options that you've outlined and others outlined should be looked at, and let both sides agree what is the best way forward.
The figures from the government suggest that in the meanwhile, thousands of people are dying prematurely because of air pollution. There is a degree of urgency. When can we expect to see London sort out this problem?
Everyone wants pollution to be reduced in London, there's no doubt about that. What's important is that we find a way to achieve targets in a meaningful way and get the right balance between economic growth and reducing pollution. And it's important that those who want to see, from NGOs who are fighting for these targets to be met quicker, sit down with those who are saying in London, who are saying this is difficult to achieve in the time frame, and can we find a more sensible way forward, and can we also find the right balance between economic growth and reducing pollution.
The government's targets earlier this year suggested the pollution target wouldn't be met until 2025 in London. Do you now think, given what the court's saying today, that can be met sooner?
What the court has decided today is that the national court should come up with a time frame, if you like, or come up with an idea of when those targets should be met. So no one's saying targets should not be met. What we're saying is what is the most sensible time frame for within London. Let's not forget, we have met a number of other targets for other pollutants. It's nitrogen dioxide that's proven the most difficult one to meet. Let's see how we can work together to make sure that we meet these targets.